in Austria. Yeah.
Yes.
Nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you, Anca.
We are waiting for Alina to come in with the camera, and also for Maria Bakalova from Bulgaria. We had the opening session, which was very rich in discussions, and I thank Anca because she was there as well in the opening with very interesting answers. I just got feedback from participants. Thank you so much.
Heavy topics.
Heavy indeed. I just saw the declaration of the Commissioner on Justice saying that Romania is on its way of developing a Polish kind of reactions.
Yeah. This is what I was mentioning in the first part, the statement and article in Financial Times by Didier Reinders. And it's, yeah, doesn't place us in a great company. And
okay, I see that Professor Bakalova has there are some technical problems to connect her. I wonder whether Alina INAYEH can open her camera.
I have opened my camera. Don't you see me? I can see myself.
I see you. I see you.
Ah, okay. I cannot see you. Maybe it's okay.
yeah, we can see you.
Okay. I don't see Alina, but who knows? Maybe, I don't know. The mystery of techniques. So maybe wait just 1 minute and see whether Maria Bakalova enters.
It's not easy to enter. So
I know we had problems in the beginning of the first session, but we sorted them in the 15 minutes, you know, the academic quarter. I don't know whether you have this expression in Hungarian. The academic
in Hungary, no, but in Germany, yes.
In Germany, yes. Well, let me introduce the speakers. And thank you all for being here. So we are starting now our roundtable discussion, which is entitled with a question: how can women experts from Eastern, Southeastern, and Central Europe counter illiberal trends in the region? And we have as keynote speakers Mrs. Alina INAYEH, Director of Black Sea Trust for Regional Cooperation of the German Marshall Fund of the United States, Senator Anca DRAGU, Romanian Senate, former President of the Romanian Senate and member of the European Affairs Committee, Professor Dr. Abilitat Andreea Pete from the Department of Gender Studies at Central European University, Vienna, and also research affiliate of the CEU Democracy Institute and Doctor of Science of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, and hopefully Associate Professor Maria Bakalova, Dean of the Faculty of International Economy and Politics, University of National and World Economy, Bulgaria. I will start by just saying a few words about our first speaker, because Alina INAYEH is the director of the Black Sea Trust of the German Marshall Fund, based in Bucharest, but this is a regional initiative, and I would like to thank her because Black Sea Trust gave us the support and trusted the National University of Political and Administrative Studies in leading this project. And I would like to say a few words about Alina. Apart from her present position, she's an active practitioner in the field of international development and democratization. having run the Freedom House office in Ukraine in 2004 and National Democratic Institute office in Russia between 2000 and 2003. She is a leading civic activist in the 90s in Romania and an active promoter of NGO sector in the region. And she is a member of our network, Eastern and Southeastern Europe FANEL network. She's a founding member, together with Senator Anca DRAGU, who is also present here. So this is in terms of beginning. I'm going to mention a few words about each of the participants in the roundtable as you speak. So Alina, you have the floor.
Thank you, Liliana, and thank you for such an overwhelming introduction. And I apologize for not being able to stay through the first session, running in and out. It's pretty crazy with everything that's going on, and I'm actually trying to get to Kiev next week, so there's a little bit of logistical things I had to take care of. So the role of women experts in countering illiberalism. I will start by saying one thing. I don't think that women have necessarily a different role than men in this particular endeavor or in this particular field. I think that both men and women experts have a very difficult task, together with politicians, together with decision makers, with the civil society leaders, in countering illiberalism. So there's no necessary distinction that I think should be made here. Second, I want to just very briefly, and I really try to make it brief, but I'm not sure how well I'll actually succeed. To speak a little bit about illiberalism in this part of the world, and not only in Europe and in the transatlantic space, as well. Unfortunately, illiberal trends have penetrated politics pretty heavily in the last 8 or 10 years. And the trends have also penetrated societies. But there is a lucky point of view, or there is some silver lining, if you want, in this, which is that even if they penetrated discourses, even if they penetrated attitudes, even if they penetrated sentiments, and they can be seen and they can be quantified and they can be illustrated in the sentiments of both populations and politicians, to a certain degree, they have not yet penetrated processes to the extent that these processes are not irreversibly undemocratic. And I don't think they have necessarily destroyed the fabric of democracy, both in Europe and in the United States. I think things are worse in the United States, but even there, I think there is still hope, and there is. We haven't reached the point of no return, to put it this way, which doesn't mean that this should be taken in any way lightly, which doesn't mean that the liberal trends are not serious, which doesn't mean that we are not actually on a downward slope. We are, but we haven't gotten to the bottom of the hole, if you want. When it comes to politicians and when it comes to politics, this is where I think the most worrying part is, because illiberal trends translated into, on one hand, anti-global trends, xenophobia, restriction of others' liberties, hate speech, even fascist tendencies. As I said, they have all penetrated the debates, they have all penetrated the political discourses. They are worse felt in places where electoral campaigns are underway, like, let's say, France, for example, although there is a serious pushback. But they are also penetrating parliamentary debates, parliamentary discourses, and in general public appearances and public statements of politicians. What is worrying about this is that all of this is propagating down, or is penetrating down to the society and to the populations, to the electorate. And here, the tendencies, the illiberal tendencies, the anti-global tendencies, anti-Western sentiment are really increasing. At the Black Sea Trust, we have a little project which is looking at national and illiberal tendencies for now in Romania, but we are also planning on extending it regionally. And I'm also following the ECFR polls that they are regularly doing on public sentiment, and you can see how the public is shying away from collective liberties, or are trying to doubt the benefit of collective rights and liberties, how they are mesmerized by dictatorial behaviors and by dictatorial attitudes, how they confuse, how they take dictatorial attitudes for strength and determination, and in general how the anti-globalist sentiment and anti-globalist sentiment is really increasing. And what's really not that everything what I've said so far is not worrying, but what's even more worrying is that at least in Romania you can see these tendencies and these sentiments, especially in the young generation, people aged 18 to 39. So in the age segment where you would actually hope to see more adherence to democratic values. But I do want to come back to silver lining, and then I will wrap it up because I know I've been talking too long. I do want to come to the silver lining, which is, yes, there is this sentiment, yes, there are these tendencies, yes, the political landscape looks more and more illiberal when it comes to discourse and to debates and to attitudes and to party platforms. But with probably the exception of Poland and Hungary, the processes have not yet become illiberal. The processes are not yet undemocratic. Even if there are minuses, even if these processes are as imperfect as probably they'll ever be, or even more so, they haven't gotten to the point where you can say there is no democracy. Europe is not a democratic place anymore. And one more thing, which I think is also a silver lining. Although, as I said, there is this sentiment within European. When I say Europe in this context, I mean European Union, because that's where I have the data from. So even if there is this sentiment, the even growing sentiment within the European Union, there is a pro-Western sentiment increasing in countries in the Eastern neighborhood. So you have the Ukrainians, which still very much believe in democratic values, European values, Western values. You have the Moldovans, even more so. You have the Georgians. So people who still believe that the liberal values are the way to go, and democracy is the way to go, and they're not as blasé, if you want, as the populations of the European Union. When it comes to the role of experts, it's not easy because experts alone can do nothing, or very little, almost nothing. If the liberal tendencies are to be countered, it has to be done in coalition or in conjunction, at least, with decision makers, with civil society leaders, and with the media. Otherwise, just experts alone can't do much. However, well, other than monitoring what's going on, doing polls, calculating, if you want, the penetration, how deep these tendencies are going, and how they are being translated in practice. But there is one thing which I think the experts should not be doing, should be avoiding as much as everybody else, which is to fall into the trap of going to the other extreme, of falling into the trap of opposing left extremism to the right extremism, falling into the trap of polarizing the debate even more, and opposing to those who trash the liberal values, opposing them an equal trashing of whatever they seem to be believing in. So I think the experts are the ones who can set a more moderate tone, and who can easily and with a lot of diplomacy and with a lot of intelligence actually can give those who have conservative views without being extreme, but have conservative views, legitimate conservative views, offer them a place and a platform where they can express these views, as long as they're, as I said, moderate, tolerant, and civilized. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alina. You spoke very fast. Which it's not a criticism, it's just I'm noticing it, and I very much liked the last part of your speech, and I'm taking this with me and with us, the idea that we researchers and experts in international relations, in political science, should set a moderate tone and try to bring more equilibrium in a world in which we tend to have more extremes. And we know from our experience in Romania, and I'm looking forward to listening to Andrea, who knows more about Hungary and I think about other countries in the region, that we have a growing number of intellectuals who actually forget about liberal values and forget about liberalism in its social and political area of rights and liberties. I'm going to stop here just to welcome and to make a short presentation of our other speaker, Senator Anca DRAGU. She is a senator in the Romanian parliament and former president of the Romanian Senate, which was the highest position held by a Romanian woman in our government establishment. She was a minister of finance in the technocratic government led by Dacian Cioloș. She worked in the European Commission as advisor in the Directorate for Economic and Financial Affairs. She worked for International Monetary Fund, and above all, Anca DRAGU is a dedicated feminist activist, and we are very proud to have her as a member of the European, Eastern and Southeastern Europe Fanel network, and being a founder of it. Actually, having the same position as Alina INAYEH, who is also a founding member of our network. So welcome, Anca, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Liliana, dear Professor Liliana POPESCU, and dear friend Liliana. As we're talking before, I think we know each other from the beginning of this, the change of the political regime in Romania. So we looking back, we did not know 30 years ago how this adventure will look like, and where are we going to be in 30 years time. And here we are today. We are debating on the tendencies of some European member states and countries in Europe regarding illiberal regimes, regarding breaching of basic rules of democracy and of the rule of law. I listened carefully to Alina's presentation, and I'm anxious to see the results of the study you're mentioning that you work on. And yeah, I fully agree with the conclusion that, of course, we need a joint effort of all stakeholders to find illiberal speech and illiberal attitude. So we have to work together experts, politicians, civil society, even the private sector should take stance in this. It's a stakeholder of the entire story on how a country, a state is evolving. So yeah, very good point that we really have to stick together. And I'm happy that at least today in the panels organized by Liliana, all stakeholders are represented. So it's not only the voice of politicians and or experts, but yeah, we can express views from different angles. Just talking a little bit about illiberal regimes and what does it mean? So what how countries are ending up in this situation. So it's we're talking actually about the gradual suppression of democratic rights and also subordination of the autonomous civil society and NGOs and even media channels to the state. So illiberal leaders, they gain control of the government, they capture autonomous institutions, and they also subdue the independent civil society that pre-existed in all these countries. Of course, that's a reaction from other political leaders and from the society, but this fight may not be equal in terms of power and strength all the time. And of course, on many occasions, illiberal leaders, they have at their disposal many instruments and in order to promote their views, and they use fake news, they use media network, and they use even somehow well recognized and appreciated influencers in a society to promote the illiberal messages. Yeah. But as we were also talking in the first part of this conference, there are some preconditions that an illiberal regime would get instituted in a country. And for the first, so a number of conditions that should coexist simultaneously in the society. And the first of all, it's the quality of institutions, weak institutions. Actually, the quality of institutions also makes the difference between poor countries and rich countries. And this is not that I'm saying this, this is the result of empirical studies in economics. You know, I'm an economist, and so I have this tendency to look always also from the angle of economic issues. Because so the strengths of institutions are those which are setting the tone, the policies, public policies in a society, that they have the possibility to see a long-term approach and a long-term combination of policies in order to ensure a good development of the society. So the quality of institutions is the main variable I see here in place. And this is how also in Romania, we have to be very careful all the time to make sure that institutions are strong and rules of these institutions are also clear and clearly observed by everybody. And another variable here, it's the rule of law. Yeah, how strong is the rule of law functioning in a country, if indeed the constitution and all laws are at the basis of all connections in a state, in an economy. And yeah, we see many slippages in countries, even in countries in Europe. Also, another variable here would be overall the democratic values that exist in a society. And as I was mentioning before, of course, democratic values in former communist countries maybe are less strong or clear than they should be in all Europe, that benefited of a long-term period of democracy and of a strong rule of law. Other variables would be the civil society, how strong the civil society it is. And in case of Romania, we are talking about young civil society. At the beginning, it was maybe not very strong. I think in the last 10, 15 years, the civil society really became more independent. And at the very beginning, we did not have enough financial tools for the civil society. And maybe yeah, it was not properly encouraged at the beginning of the 90s and 2000. But also in the 90s, I think we can talk about the dominance of economic topics. Yeah, Romania got through a very long and painful period of economic transition to the market economy that probably did not support too much the development of the civil society. So these are the ingredients that are, and the variables that are very important when we're talking about illiberal regimes and the development of such regimes in some countries. They are also associated with populism, yes? And it's here, for sure, it's a strong correlation. We cannot say the causality, but for sure it's a strong correlation. And we see populism in different forms. While in Western countries, populism is more linked to migration. In Central and Eastern Europe, populism is more based on economic and nationalistic slogans, and also on the anti-globalist messages, which were mentioned by Alina, I think are present in all countries, actually, even in Western economies. Of course, former communist countries are more exposed to slippages from the good best practices and from the rule of law practices. And even we may recall in Romania some moments when the quality of institutions was significantly questioned and put at risk, such the mid of 2012, it was a moment, beginning of 2017. Yeah, there were moments when the democratic values were really shaken. August 10, 2018, also it's another it's another important moment. Inside EU, it's much easier to fight against illiberal regimes. Also, yeah, we do have these two cases of Hungary and Poland. And as we were talking, Liliana, about the statements of Commissioner Didier Reinders about Romania, that looks like it's gets towards the club of these countries. But anyway, Europe develops its mechanisms to fight illiberal regimes, and we had the cooperation and verification mechanism that was developed only for 2 countries, But now it was a very good decision that the evaluation of the rule of law applies to all member states. Yeah, because slippages may appear in any country at some moment in time, and yeah, we can discuss a lot about this new framework established by the European Commission, the rule of law framework to address such threats at the level of the European Union. Of course, the idea is that to enforce dialogue, to make sure that countries are coming back to rules and principles. And so if no solution is found within the rule of law framework, then we have Article 4 of the Treaty on the European Union. That is a sort of last resort mechanism to solve crisis and to ensure that EU member states are complying with the EU values. We were thinking about what can we do here at the FANEL, and that what can we do in general. My main idea is to strengthen institutions. I started by talking about the quality of institutions, and it means that we need rules, we need meritocracy when you're talking about leaders of institutions, and political parties, political leaders should be really aware of the need to strengthen institutions. We should appreciate a strong institution rather than an institution that is somehow friend of a political party, of a politician. This should not exist for sure. What can we do at the level of the parliament and in the government? A lot, yes. We can make sure that the rule of law and democratic rules are not 100% applied, but 200% applied. And especially for Romania, we should make sure that comments like those in Financial Times yesterday by Didier Reinders will not happen. And for me, it was a shock. Yeah, this morning I started with this article in Financial Times, and I was very, very upset. And the government should take it into consideration seriously and fix it. What else we can do to speak up, to organize, and as we discussed in the beginning of this conference, for us women, I do expect that more women will join politics and will become political leaders, and especially women like you, my dear friends, with strong technical background. So you can really make a difference in politics because you can really apply this kind of judgmental measures and decisions based on knowledge, not only based on impressions. Look, I'll stop here my comments about illiberal regimes and what we can do. And let's continue later on with discussions.
Thank you very much, Senator DRAGU. I just realized, just listening to you, listening to Alina, and knowing that Andrea is forthcoming, that we are representing sort of three different areas. So like the NGO area, the political area, and now we have the academic area. And I'm very happy to welcome now Professor Andrea Pete, who is also a member of our network. It's one of the newest members of our network, and we are very, very proud and honored that she accepted. And let me just say a few words about her. Andrea Pete is a historian, and she's a professor at the Department of Gender Studies at Central European University, Vienna. teaching a number of courses on European comparative social and gender history, on gender and politics, so on and so forth, including women's movement, which is a very important part of political science, to know what is happening with the women's movement. But Andrea Petto is also a civic activist, and this is something that makes us resemble, I believe, me and her. I'm happy we have her on board. She was awarded in 2018 an important award. It is the All European Academies Madame de Staël Prize for Cultural Values, and she's also a Doctor Honoris Causa of Södertörn University in Stockholm, Sweden. Andrea, welcome, and you have the floor now.
Thank you, Liliana, for the invitation, and I'm really honored to be on this panel. And congratulations to this initiative, and this is a fantastically timely and important conference. And what I would like to talk about is basically 2 points. One is that what is this problem we have? So what, because for a good strategy, we need a good analysis. What is happening now? And then I would like to give some suggestions how to move forward. So what we see now, I mean, in the title, we had this illiberalism. So there are, political scientists are ready to die for a distinction or for a terminology. So is this illiberalism? Is it the fascism, which was already mentioned? Is it a backlash? Is it a constitutional revolution? Is it a revival of authoritarianism? What is this, what we are experiencing now? And this kind of uncertainty already somehow projects that this is really a contested area. So what is the problem? What are the root causes of this problem? And actually, with Weronika Grzebalska from Poland, we developed a concept which I think would be really interesting and useful to understand the present developments. And this is the concept of the polypore state. And before you start Googling what this polypore is, this is this mushroom which lives on the trunk of the tree, uses the energy and the resources and the ideas from the tree, produces nothing else than the polypore, the mushroom. And of course, I'm aware of this biologizing metaphor, but when that it's a biologizing metaphor, but when I get to the point of what can we do, you will see that this metaphor actually helps us to create useful and effective strategies. So what is this polypore, right? And if you just envisage this tree and the polypore, this mushroom which lives on the trunk of the tree, you see that this is not something which is brought from outside, like but it is a part of the development. So what the problem, what we are actually facing today, the rise of illiberalism, is connected to the dark legacy of Europe and the European modernization, which is colonialism, which is mass murder, which is the Holocaust, which is the extermination, forced moving, colonialism. So this dark legacy is there. And these forces are not coming from the moon, right? These forces are a part of our history. And this is, of course, a job of the historian to think about this. What did we do wrong in the past years not to face with this dark legacy? The second is that this is also connected to the new phase of the neoliberalism, and especially in Eastern Europe, where what we are discussing today, the failures of the neoliberalized modernization, that there are so many losers and so many disappointments as far as the neoliberalization is concerned, and especially women who believed in those ideas, and with the European Union enlargement. They thought that those equality, liberty, and fraternity will actually happen in their lifetime, and they had to recognize that this is not happening. And what they received is this very technocratic European Union language, and they haven't found any support from the state because the neoliberalization dismantled the functioning state, and they could only rely on the family and family networks. So these are the two causes, I would say, which I would like to mention here: the dark legacy and the inability to face the dark legacy, and also the failures of neoliberalization. And what is this polypore state? This polypore state can be identified with the modus operandi. How does it operate? And first of all, it works with security narratives. Everything becomes a threat. George Soros, the migrants, gender studies professionals, they are all threats. So then the politicians can be saviors. The second is that it sets up parallel institutions. If you look at the CEDAW reports of Hungary or Poland, you see that these illiberal governments are reporting a flourishing NGO scene. Yes, the NGO scenes are flourishing, but these are not NGOs, but gongos, government-sponsored NGOs, which are mirroring, doubling, instrumentalizing, taking over the previously existing, flourishing, secular, liberal women's NGOs. And these do not stop. The copying doesn't stop here. This copycat activity of the state also includes copying and funding parallel universities, parallel research institutes. So this is basically, just think about the tree and the polypore. So you see, it is basically copying, and because the illiberals do not have any original ideas, they are just copying what is there in the tree. And the third is familialism. The illiberal state doesn't have family policy. It has familialism policy. It means that they are focusing on the family and the imagined unit as the center of the society, and women are disappearing. Women are no actors. Women do not have voice, and that's why this is really important. What can we do? And the first is that, the topic of this panel is women and experts. And what can we do when in an illiberal context, this anti-intellectualism and anti-expert feelings are rampant? The anti-intellectualism, which is coming partly from how neoliberalism undermined the previous value system and the credit of intellectual work, and partly coming from how the illiberal polypore state operates, basically appointing nobodies as experts. Again, think about copying and instrumentalizing and creating other forms of expert. So, but the expert, the value and the dignity of intellectual work is actually a very important weapon. And unfortunately, our colleagues and our comrades are recognizing only very late, when the illiberal polypore forces already created their own institutions, transnational organizations, and transnational networks. So what women can do and should do, because this, we are at the moment in this socializational fight for liberal values, and what is new now in 2021, that illiberalism actually presented itself as a livable, viable, desirable alternative to liberalism. And this happened already in the 1930s. So that's why we have got this whole literature about, are we living the Weimar time? Is this fascism? Is this the rise of fascism? But what is new now in comparison to the 1920s is actually, it is gender equality, and the concept of gender where this new Cold War is being waged. And that's why I would like to, again, welcome this initiative and this whole conference, because the reconfiguration and redefinition of gender relations, the concept of gender, that is the center of this fight, as we defined it with Veronika Grzebelska and Esther Kovács. Gender became a symbolic glue, which glues together very different forces, very different illiberal forces. The Russian Orthodox Church, the Polish Catholic Church, the Hungarian illiberals, the Republican Party, they all unite in the field of gender, because gender becomes a symbolic glue, and they are attacking reproductive rights. They are attacking women as experts. They are questioning the right of women to intellectual work. They are questioning the right of women to have another life than being simply women, simply mothers, sorry. So that is a really important point here, that we have to understand that there is a very new situation. I don't share the optimism of Alina that there is a possibility to return. I think it's a fundamentally new situation here because of the new structure, this new polypore state. So what can we do? What can we do? First of all, and this might sound very cheap, but first of all, we have to take care of ourselves and be happy. And this is like a Coelho type of wisdom, but nothing will come out if we are sad, tired, overworked, depressed, and sad and tired. So, because that would not save anybody. So taking care of yourself and being happy is a form of resistance and a form of fighting against this illiberal trend, which is making you busy, unhappy, sad, tired, and exhausted. And so this might sound very cheap, but I think this is the starting point. And the second one is to create alternative institutions. I know Hungary well, I think I know Poland well. I see that these countries are already, the institutions are already taken over by the illiberal forces. There's a beautiful term for this, which is called state capture. The state actually captured those institutions. So what can you do when you think nothing can be done? So first of all, take care of yourself. And secondly, organize and alternative institutions. And I think that the best example and the most interesting inspiration can come from the times during communism, because communism was also a form of state capture, and the alternative academies and alternative institutions, the flying universities during communism were fantastic opportunities to create a space for free intellectual work, free from credit transfer, free from ECTS, free from deliverables. I mean, Liliana, knows that this is actually, this neoliberalization of higher education crippled the knowledge production in the past years.
I fully agree. I love what you're saying. I'm taking notes, Andrea.
Thank you. So I will finish here. So I would say that there should be two types of strategies. One is which is starting from inside, and the other is to reach out and to organize these kind of alternative spaces. And I'm very optimistic in a sense that the polypore doesn't have any ideas. The ideas are taken from us. And therefore, when we are thinking about agenda setting, it is important to move away from the polypore and to be active and not reactive, and think about strategically what are the aims we would like to achieve, independently, constantly watching and reacting to the statements and ideas or non-ideas coming from illiberal forces. So thanks again for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Wonderful, Andrea. I mean, really, I was taking notes, and we are going to try maybe to edit the whole event and focus on the ideas that you just mentioned as solutions, because I think I have very good sense. I think that precisely because Hungary and Poland are way ahead us in terms of illiberalism, unfortunately or fortunately, because it's fortunately because we can learn from you. And I think that, yes, what we are doing here is that we are happy, and I think we found each other, and we are finding continuously each other, women like-minded, which obviously we are counter this illiberal trend, and we learn from you, and we are organizing. So thank you very much. I see now that we have a question from Galina Yakova, who says, what is your view of the impact of the coronavirus for the return of discrimination and censorship in Europe? This is one question. How can countries who impose measures which are in conflict with the European Human Rights Charter be proponents of democracy and an example for dealing with illiberal practices and reinforcing the rule of law? So I'm opening this question to all of you. I think. Yes.
I can take, thank you. This is a fantastic question, Galina. I'm happy to respond to the first question, partly because that's a huge one. What is the impact of the global pandemic? And the global pandemic actually revealed one characteristic of this, of the weakness of the state, that it's non-functioning. If you look at the non-functioning of the neoliberal state and the non-functioning of the illiberal state. So if you compare Germany, for example, which is a strong democracy, but the way how they were handling the pandemic was equally disastrous as Hungary was handling the pandemic, because it turns out that they were unable to create functioning institutions and structures. And then the solution in both cases was the militarization. And that I find particularly important to emphasize here, because when the state is collapsing, then the military and the militarization is coming in as a kind of solution. So the pandemic is really a game changer, because you get used to that men, mostly men in camouflage, are in hospitals distributing food, helping those who are in need, because the state is non-functional. And then the military takes up this function. So if I can bring in one aspect, what was the impact of the COVID, because I'm sure that the others would like to contribute as well, I would say that the remilitarization of Europe was one, and also the US and everywhere. So you see that the remilitarization is one of the impacts. And if we want to have a livable, desirable, and peaceful world, in the long run, we might want to think critically and formulate alternatives to this militarization. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Because you mentioned this remilitarization, let me just mention here that we have so far 2 ambassadors of our network, and one of them is Professor Cynthia Enlow, who is a top academic in terms of feminist international relations. And let me recommend to the audience to read the works of Cynthia Enlow. Thank you, Andrea. If Anca or Alina would like to intervene with answers to any of these 2 questions.
Yeah, I don't quite understand the second question, so I will answer the first question, which is at least for me clear. There is one factor which we haven't mentioned at all when it's in all of the presentations, or not too much anyway, which is extremely important when it comes to illiberalism, and I think it's been exacerbated by the coronavirus crisis. And this is social media and the reliance of everybody on social media. So what the crisis has actually done is that isolating us in our houses, we have turned even more to social media. We have turned even more to relying on getting information from social media. The echo chambers have become even more segregated, isolated, and this has only helped, societies become even more polarized, and it helped getting the illiberal messages out there to the population to the extent that 2 years ago we were not thinking of. And then the reaction came, which is how I mean the government, how do we deal with this? We censor the internet, we censor what is being put out there, we censor the opinions that some groups or some individuals might have on certain issues, especially those related to vaccines, corona, and everything else, which has, as Andrea was mentioning, which has somewhat made us, comply with the idea of censorship, even starting to believe that a certain degree of censorship is healthy, in terms of dealing with the society and dealing with the medical crisis. And this is wrong. Censorship is wrong. Any degree of censorship is wrong. But what happened again is that we became accustomed to being censored and even self-censoring ourselves to a certain degree. So I think that's what the coronavirus crisis has done, in addition to everything else.
Thank you, Alina, for your answer, which is complementing Andrea's answer. We have now two questions. One question for Senator Anca DRAGU, and a question, I think, for everybody. Let me ask Anca. You mentioned, says the question, you mentioned today the strength of civil society, that the strength of civil society is crucial. Is the Romanian young and independent, as you described it, civil society strong enough to fight the liberal trends?
Yeah, excellent question. In short, yes. Short answer is yes, I believe so. But, the strength of civil society is not something as we get as granted. It's something that we have to care for. We have to be looking for. And the civil society should really be involved in all discussions when we're talking about the policy-making process. What I do as a senator and as a politician is to really listen to the civil society and to listen to them, to pick up their proposals, their points of view, and to include their opinions and voices in the policies I propose. So this is what I do, and I believe this is what politicians should do. We should talk to all representatives of a society, to all stakeholders, and civil society is an important one. I have to tell you, I'm really proud of the fact that I get in general positive feedback, and I have this feedback from the civil society that they feel that are really listened by my colleagues in general, by, my party, that's a young party. We are the young politicians in the Romanian political scene. And we do believe in this dialogue with the civil society. And it's a great honor for me and my colleagues that we get this feedback from the civil society, that they feel they are heard, they are supported, their work is meaningful. It is true that I worked a lot with representatives of civil society, especially when we're talking about some basic civil rights and talking about preventing domestic violence, human trafficking, and with supporting rights of people with disabilities. These are the areas that I focused more during the 2021 when it was my first year as a member of the parliament. And my feeling is that civil society is strong, but should be more listened. And should be more listened even by all the traditional parties or older parties we have in Romania. Now I think it's they're really a partner for my party for sure. And as also Andrea mentioned, and so we all agree here, and we have the input of professionals, of experts, and that institutions and civil society are two very strong forces that make the difference between a democratic state or an illiberal state. So I think that's we agree here, and this is why we all should contribute on our side to make this both institutions and civil society stronger. Also, I always mention media, that it's very important for the sanity and for health of our society. But talking about the pandemic, and I like the idea of Andrea with about the military that took over this disintegrating institutions. This is something else to think of, that we even have a prime minister that is military. It's a former general. And this was, yeah, of course, many people wondered and asked themselves why we need a military as a prime minister. And this is, yeah, that's a question I think already received many answers. And I'll not make any other comments here. I'll let experts to make the comments.
Thank you very much, Anca, for your answer. Let me have a reaction to this question, because the question is related to the civil society, which is young, independent, and how strong is it to counter illiberal trends. And I would like to refer to 3 examples from Romania's political life, which shows that our civil society is vibrant and powerful. Remember February 2017, when the government, which was subordinated to the president of the Social Democratic Party, Mr. Liviu Dragnea, they wanted to adopt a governmental ordinance which would have diminished or simply, yes, would have diminished the independence of our justice system. That the Romanian citizens in Bucharest, they flooded the streets, the center of Bucharest, where the government building is, Victoria Square, and it was the biggest demonstration in the last, I think, 10 years or even more in Europe's history. That was a kind of mobilization which was very, very strong on the average and grassroots citizen. Let me also give the example of the LGBT community in Romania, which was strong, and it built strength during years, so that the pride and the civic demonstration focused on LGBT rights. So these prides developed and became and many citizens started to participate in these events, which are yearly events. I think that the LGBT movement grew through the activity of people, of citizens. And of course, with a very good leadership. I'm not going to mention now names, even though I know and I really, but maybe I should. Yes, I would invoke here the name of Florin Bucuceanu, of the director Teodora Ion Rotaru of Accept, and the director of Mosaic, Vlad Vischi. They are just three important names, but around them there are many other people who contributed to the development of this pro-LGBT rights and liberties in Romania. Also, let me invoke an episode in which I was involved 2 years ago in 2020, when a deputy in our Chamber of Deputies initiated the change of the law on education, and which our president, Iohannis, rejected it, didn't countersign it, and sent it to the Constitutional Court of Romania. And then, because the civil society, many people in civil society, NGOs, leaders, realized the potential of illiberalism in this new law of education, they reacted. What was in this new law of education was actually forbidding talk about gender, actually forbidding gender studies in our country. And we knew from the experience of Hungary what happened with the Central European University and from Poland, and so we had these examples. And then we mobilized, and at least I can tell from my experience with two colleagues, Oana Băluță and Ionela Băluță from University of Bucharest, together with other colleagues, including Florin Bucuceanu. We organized a whole mobilization to get support from abroad for a viewpoint, amicus curiae, that we sent to the Constitutional Court, saying that, among others, this law would have as an effect the infringement of the autonomy of universities. And we received, if you can believe, 831 signatures, either rectors, vice rectors, representatives of research institutes throughout the world. It was not the only amicus curiae sent to the Constitutional Court. There were other amicus curiae from other sources. So this means that civil society, these NGOs, associations working on liberal values, in favor of liberal values, we organized each other. And we were successful because the law was considered unconstitutional by our Constitutional Court. I'm going to stop talking here. Maybe I talk too much, but I had to give these three examples because it shows that we can and we should organize ourselves and not let the illiberals do their work. I am a very how should I say, very strong supporter of Michel Foucault's concept of power. He says, no matter how powerful is somebody in a power position, there will always be little powers, little opponents somewhere in civil society in the underground. And we are these people who are undermining those who think they are all powerful. I stop here. There is a question that was written here in our chat. What is the connection between the crisis of neoliberal capitalist democracy and the current trends toward illiberal practices? So who would like to answer this question? So what is the connection between the crisis of neoliberal capitalist democracy and the current illiberal practices?
I can try and answer it, although I'm not an academician, and I'm sure others will add a more academic point of view. Yes, it all started with the economic crisis, and in 2008, that's when the illiberal tendencies, the illiberal trends have started to be more and more vocal and more and more visible. But my question, not my question, it's a rhetorical question. My dilemma, rather, is an egg and chicken dilemma. What generated what? Is the crisis of the neoliberal capitalist democracy generating liberal tendencies, or are illiberal tendencies aggravating and exacerbating the crisis of neoliberal capitalist democracy? It's a vicious circle, actually, that we are in. They are feeding into each other, and I think we are at guilt somehow, and by we I mean we the liberals, those who value the liberal values, because we don't acknowledge the crisis. We don't talk about our vulnerabilities. We shy away from looking the demon into the eye and say, yes, it's not perfect. Democracy is not perfect. It hasn't been functioning lately for various reasons. It failed certain citizens. It failed some groups. Whatever it is, whatever we believe the vulnerabilities are, we should be openly talking about it, other than just hiding behind our fingers and then let the illiberals use this vulnerability to exaggerate them, to exacerbate them, and to convince people that democracy is no good. It just shows weakness and lack of determination. So I think we have our own fault here. I also want to add something to the answer that Anca DRAGU gave to the question on civil society in Romania. I agree, it's strong, but it's not enough. Civil society alone is not enough to fight illiberalism in Romania or anywhere else. If we just rely on civil society, we are not getting anywhere. We have to have politicians on our side. We have to have media or certain part of media on our side. We have to have businesses on our side. Otherwise, just civil society won't do anything, and not accomplishing much will turn against it again, as the population or the population will be fed with the idea that civil society is not strong because it can't accomplish much when it comes to fighting illiberalism. So we have to be very careful in how we play this. Otherwise, the image of civil society will be trashed even more.
Thank you, Alina. Please. Please, Anca.
Yeah, a small comment that yes, I said that it's not as granted. We don't have to take it as granted that we do have a strong civil society, and we have to fight for consolidating it, for making it relevant in the policy-making process. So I fully agree with what Alina said. I just wanted to make clear that, okay, I didn't say we lay back, now the civil society is strong, we can go home and everything is said. No, we have to fight for this and to pay attention, deserved attention to the civil society, and to make sure every day that it is strong enough. Thanks.
Thank you, Anca. Andrea, please.
Thank you very much for these fantastic questions. I posted 2 links to the chat, so you might want to read these 2 articles. If you don't have access to the depository of the article, you can find the second one. You can find it on my academia.edu webpage, so you can download it from there. And I would like to contribute to the concept of civil society, because the expectation that the civil society is a watchdog of democracy is coming from the 1968-ish movement. And unfortunately, the illiberalism and the rise of liberalism fundamentally question the definition of NGOs and what they are actually doing and what kind of authorization do they have. because recently the illiberal polypore state not only basically took the resources from the different NGOs. To make it even worse, they were labeled as foreign agents in some of the states. It means that they don't have access to foreign funding. It means that they became totally isolated and remained alone in a society where all the resources are controlled by the state. That's what is called state capture. So I think this is totally unfair and unrealistic to expect the civil organizations which are struggling in the liberal states to actively fight against the liberal state. And I give you an example. If you look at which is very relevant to this panel, and that is the CEDAW report. For those listeners who do not know this, I mean, every government is expected to submit the report on the status of women in that particular country regularly. And these reports are discussed by the CEDAW Commission and the different NGOs and other stakeholders are invited to submit shadow reports, because of course the governments are reporting that they are doing fantastically on every aspect. It's growing, it's flourishing, it's fantastic. What is really the case, you usually get from the shadow reports. And if you have time, I invite you to look at the different shadow reports of the different countries. And you see that the quality of the shadow reports decreased enormously in the past years. You can legitimately ask the question, did the experts become more stupid, or they did not want to write good reports, or what is happening? And the answer is that basically in the previous years, the experts who were working on the field of gender equality, they either emigrated from those countries or they had to find other jobs because they did not have resources. So this kind of intellectual the lack of intellectual depth and of these shadow reports are connected to how the polypore state was actually sucking all the resources and energies from that sphere. And to make it even worse, as I pointed out in my opening statement, this polypore state set up their own NGO sphere. They are channeling the money which they take from other NGOs to those who are supporting their agenda and their political picture and their political future. So if you read again the CEDAW reports of the government, from Mexico to Russia, they are, reporting about a flourishing NGO sphere. But what do these NGOs do? So that's why it's really important to stop this kind of illusion that the NGOs will fight against the illiberal state. No, I mean, you cannot expect them to do it. There are two important aspects. What can, the fight against the illiberal state? One is that the European Union should stop financing those states which are actually successfully de-democratizing the countries. So if you look at Hungary, if you look at Poland, if you look at the other countries, this new elite which capture the state, they are financed by the European taxpayers and the European mechanisms, and the non-transparent spending of the European Union taxpayers' money fundamentally contributed to the rise of illiberalism. So this is the first thing, that the European Union should pull itself together, and I think this was one of the important points which had been already made. And the second is that the relationship between the NGOs and movements should be reconsidered, because the NGOs, they have a solid structure, legal charter, they have an accountant, a lawyer, and whatever. And this is exactly what the illiberal states are attacking and undermining. So that's why movements are more successful against the illiberal state, because they cannot be captured, because there is not a center, there is not a leader, there is not an accountant who can be threatened. So, and the examples what Liliana was mentioning in the case of Romania, I mean, these were movements. They were not run by NGOs, but they were kind of loose coalitions of different concerned citizens who were saying, enough, basta. And then they started to get organized. So I would, suggest for the future to reconsider this myth that the NGOs can solve everything. No, they cannot. Thank you.
Can I interfere here a little, Liliana, because I partially disagree with what Andrea was saying. When you say that NGO should not be expected to fight illiberalism, well, the practice shows differently. Through the Black Sea Trust, we are giving funds, we are giving grants to NGOs in extremely illiberal countries. And despite the hardships and despite the danger, the serious and personal danger, they continue to fight illiberalism. They continue to fight authoritarianism in their countries. We are not pushing them to do so. Nobody's pushing them to do so. European Union is not even reaching those places. But NGOs are fighting illiberalism. So I don't exactly know what kind of example you have in mind when you say that they are not and they shouldn't, but in the countries where we work, in very difficult situations, they definitely are.
Andrea would like to, yes?
Yeah, yes, yeah. So in a sense, this international support to different NGOs is a form of creating professional NGO activists, which is fantastic, because then there is this a kind of political training and creating the future political elite when these illiberal states are somehow collapsing or being overthrown. But the problem is that these professional activists are not necessarily connected to the real problems and the structural problems of those countries. So, but please don't misunderstand me. I don't want to undermine or diminish the importance, the heroism of those who are fighting among difficult circumstances. I'm talking to you as a political exile from Vienna. So my position is pretty safe, but there are several colleagues who are still in Hungary, and they are fighting, and they are doing what they can. But what I was actually arguing, that the strategy should not be solely based on the NGO sphere, because the way how NGOs are operating now, that they are looking for outside funding, and very often this outside funding comes with a tag, what kind of agenda should be pushed, and this kind of donor dependency is basically blinding some of the NGOs and some of the activists, and they can only see where the money is coming from. But look for other sources and other ways of doing that. And of course, you can say, she's an tenured academic, she's a professor, she can do this, she can have this opinion. Of course, but if you look at my other activity, you see that I'm also doing podcasts. I'm very active on Twitter. I'm writing lots of op-eds. That's what academics can do. And I would not be in a position, and I would never like to be in a position to tell what others should be doing. First of all, we have to think about what we can do. But my point was mostly a theoretical point, that if we look at comparatively the development of the civil society in this illiberal context, we see that the NGOs, with their formalized structure, which is mostly demanded by the donors, they want transparency, they want a lawyer, they want an accountant, they want to see a leader. That actually is a kiss of death for these NGOs operating in illiberal countries. So a kind of new innovative approach is needed, not only a one-to-one expert of different ideas and concepts.
This is a whole different conversation, but as a donor, I do take issue with some of the things you are generalizing, Andrea. But again, this is a whole different conversation, and we can take it offline and tell you how Black Sea Trust operates, and you'll start, giving donors some more credit afterwards.
Thank you. This is a very interesting discussion, but I take it that Andrea is pointing a lot to these gongos, the government operating, actually those associations and NGOs, which are basically related to the government somehow, because we know in Hungary, at least this is what we are reading in the media, yes, these money that actually go to these NGOs, even from the states. I mean, let me just read this comment from Florin Bucuceanu, who is an LGBT leader, maybe the most prominent in Romania. He says, I understand the distinction between NGOs and movements, but quite often the movement is based on the expertise of people trained in the area of civil society. Otherwise, agree with the need to connect with larger movements. Now, unless you would like to go on with this topic, I would like to pick up on what Andrea was saying in her main speech. So you said that the illiberals are not creative and that they are copying. They are creating copies of liberal institutions, and maybe gongos are actually this sort of copying of NGOs, of genuine liberal associations and organizations. And then you said that actually what is happening now in these countries with illiberal tendencies and practices is that they are going back to a state-controlled society. And also you said that maybe we should look back at our history, the communist times, when again we had a state-controlled society, and maybe we should think of the creative ideas we had in those times in order to counter the present illiberalism. And I wonder whether any of you can think of these creative ways in which we can counter these trends in which the state is trying to again to bring societies under their power.
Thank you very much for bringing this up. I have got two suggestions. One is that a dissent during the 1970s said, when he was asked how is he so brave, he said, I just pretend the Soviets are not here. They are not here. I just live my life if the Soviets were not stationing in Hungary. So I would say that the creativity starts when you can ignore those structural and other pressures which are expect you to be afraid, tired, exhausted, and compliant. So that's why I always reject the media inquiries when they ask me to comment on what XYZ was saying. And I say, no, I mean, if you're interested in what my opinion is about the issue, what XYZ was mentioning in the parliament or somewhere else, I'm happy to share with you what I think. And that's usually the end of the story and the end of the interest of the media, because they are interested in this boomerang, this loop, to create this, who is responding on what. And that's what I said in my introductory talk, that we have to be active and not reactive. So this is what I learned when I, as a historian of the communism, can translate it to nowadays. And the second is what I already mentioned, alternative institutions and alternative sites for knowledge production. And this can be a book club, this can be a a small group of people listening to and commenting to each other's work, which is independent from funding, from donors, from learning deliverables, from credits, from outcomes, but for the sheer joy of building yourself up and to be living a fulfilling intellectual productive life. And these were the flying universities during communism. And that's from where actually the CEU is coming from, the tradition of the flying university, because the founding fathers, at that time only fathers, the founding fathers of CEU were those who were the founders of the flying universities in the different countries. So maybe we should go back to that and to use our time for a kind of really a space, a time for free and independent intellectual work. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Would you like to comment on this, Anca or Alina?
If I can, yeah, I think we should be doing exactly what the liberals are doing, but the other way around. Use exactly the same methods that they use, but with the good messages instead of the bad messages. I think we should also be exposing, you know, authoritarianism for what it is. We should be exposing the lack of democracy for what it is. We should be exposing, you know, restricting freedom for what it is. We are very, very shy. We are very, very nice, and we shouldn't be. We shouldn't be. We should just fight with the same. It's a fight. It's a fight. So we should fight with the same methods as they are, but promote our messages instead of their messages. One thing that is missing also, and I think it's extremely important, Andrea was somewhat hinting at it throughout her interventions, is we have to teach people history. We are talking about communism. Andrea is talking about communism. Liliana is talking about communism. But if you talk to a younger person about communism, they can't relate to this. They don't know what it feels like to live under communism or to live in a restrictive society. So we have to teach them history in order to have them understand, or to have them relate to something which is more understandable for them. But we have to fight with the same methods. So if we can find money, I'm sorry, I'm for money, I'm for funds, we need money to get into this fight. If we can find money for factories of elves instead of factories of trolls, I'm all for it.
Yes, thank you. It's a very optimistic. I like that you are both pro-action. And actually, let me say here that together with Alina, and actually this was an activity that was organized by True Story Project, which is funded by German Marshall Fund, by Black Sea Trust. We initiated a series of discussions exactly like this, roundtable discussions with historians presenting the true faces of the Legionnaire movement in Romania. Because we have now a new party in the parliament, which is extremist, basically. I'm not going to get into details. I'm just saying that we had, I think, six discussions, debates on various aspects of this Legion movement in the 30s, 20s, 30s, and even 40s, and afterwards. Anyway, so let me invite Anca, DRAGU, if you would like to comment on the latest discussions here, please.
I liked very much Alina's suggestion and strong position that yeah, we should fight back and we should take serious attitude. And just having this in mind, I just want to comment also what you said on this new party with very dubious principles we have now in the parliament, and what happened today, for example, that they took over the city hall in Timișoara, and they entered the building, and they forced and surprise, institutions that were supposed to protect them, like police, gendarmerie, they were not present. They did not do the job. So I see on one hand how weak these institutions are. And just talking at the beginning and during today's conference about the strengths of institutions. So we see more and more often that the force institutions are actually weak or prefer to to act as being weak. And also that political parties that are forcing such behavior and are promoting such behavior, and we are in a phase of where we have to be intolerant with such this attitude. Of course, we are talking now about a party that joined the parliament with 9%, but it's on the rise because exactly because of the temptation of very populistic and demagogic speech that they are using, and we have to be, all of us, not only politicians, to be there to fight against this attitude. So yeah.
Thank you, Anca. Let me just read a few comments from our chat. Florin Buhuceanu saying that we are the founding mothers of new flying universities, which is nice. In Romanian, I would say simpatic. Galina Iacova, she's saying, yes, we shouldn't be silent about the authoritarian measures in Austria and the discrimination in Germany. Would you like to comment on this? The main speakers, please.
I would like to make a comment. Thanks for this, because it has been already mentioned that what we are seeing now is a transnational trend. It's a global trend. So, and that is very often misleading because you have got this we in Hungary, we in Poland. It's a kind of methodological nationalism that we think that, you know, that is important, that what's happening in Hungary, in Poland, in Romania, whatever. However, this is really a global trend. And very often, and that belongs to the problem where I started my presentation, that first we have to understand what is happening. So we have to define this beast, right, which we are dealing with. And this is not a kind of national beast. This is a transnational, it's a global beast, what we are dealing with. And it really depends on the different institutional legacies and structures, how this beast is taking over. And Austria just got rid of Kurz, right? So who actually was had to resign because of a really minor issue, if you ask me, based on Hungary. I mean, this is an everyday practice that the government is buying false surveys and polls. And in Austria, that's a mortal sin, and he had to resign. So, and that shows that the methodological and theoretical problem that on the one hand, we have a global phenomenon, which we should not focus down, narrow down to the national context. On the other hand, this fight is fought on the national context. So we have to know the national players, but having an eye on the big picture. So, and this kind of dynamic is really important to keep in mind. And thank you very much for this comment, because that gave me the opportunity to underline the importance of this dynamic, the global and the local, how they are actually shaping these tendencies. Thank you.
This is a great, sorry, Alina, just to say, to underline this, I like this. It is a global beast. I like this. I take this with me. I have a question, but I would like to offer the floor to Alina.
I don't think we are silent about what's going on in Western countries. We just talked about, you know, the shortcomings of democracy as it is implemented, or as it's, yeah, as it is now in Western Hemisphere, US included. So yes, it's not only original; it's a transatlantic trend, which makes it even more worrisome. Because it's even stronger this way. But also, I would add, we shouldn't only look at illiberalism at the level of politicians and or official, decision makers. We also have to worry about the illiberal tendencies within societies, because that's where the next leaders are coming from, next generation of leaders. And this is true for all the countries in Europe and for the United States. Illiberal values are being more and more appreciated by societies, by people in these countries, and that's something that should also worry us. Even in countries where the governments are still liberal and they're still valuing democracy and are governing well. There are illiberal tendencies, rifting the societies, and I think this should also worry us.
Definitely, I think you are very right, and I think this is an even more difficult question to. I mean, this beast, the illiberal attitudes and values of many people, of majorities. This is something to be studied, and I have to say that maybe this is, as Andrea was pointing out, the result of our karma, maybe the global North karma, maybe the European karma, the colonialism, the neoliberalism, and so on and so forth. My question, and it's a rhetorical question as well, is to what extent the changes at the level of international relations is fostering this illiberal trend. I'm referring here to the relative decay of the US and the emergence of other powers, of China. If you look economically, for sure. If you look militarily, you see Russia, and then you see, I don't know, others. I don't want to mention, but I wonder to what extent these changes in the balance of power at the, I mean, I'm not a fan of realism, but just as a matter of speech, to what extent these changes are actually favoring illiberal mentalities, values, and practices. If you would like to respond to that, I would be happy. If not, I'm happy as well. We also have another comment here.
If Putin gets his way in Ukraine, then the illiberal tendencies will increase dramatically throughout Europe and in US as well. I think this answers your question, right? This
is a forecast. This is.
No, I said if. I didn't say when. I said if.
I said if. Yes. This is a possibility, of course. We'll see. Let me read a comment or question here. I didn't get to read it so far. Thank you. It says Vansa Davitashvili. Thank you very much for your insightful speeches. One of the arguments of illiberal movements or NGOs in Georgia is that member states of the EU are having major democracy building problems, and how can we learn lessons from the EU? So for third countries, civil society is even complicated to argue. Who would like to comment?
I don't think it's difficult to argue. Come on, I mean, yes, of course, they have problems. There are people who genuinely and legitimately are unhappy. They are disenfranchised. They have all of these problems, which I totally agree with. But people don't fly out of balconies. I mean, come on. If you look at the other model, the other model, things are much worse. So what are you really talking about here? That's why I'm saying, yes, we have our own problems, but the alternative is so much worse. So I don't think it's difficult. We just have to say it out loud.
I think it's also a matter of people's confidence in their capacity as citizens. I think that the more societies are, I mean, the richer societies are, I think the more liberties are flourishing, even though this is a relative thing. But I think in countries with consistent and constant economic issues and economic and social issues, I think it's more difficult to feel confident to assert your rights. This is just a thought. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I may
Please,
comment
Anca.
on that. Indeed, we may look at the pyramid of needs in our lives, yes, and if we have this in mind and look at countries at different level of income per capita, or standard of living in general. So, of course, for countries with very low with low income, then for those countries and people living in these countries are focusing their daily struggle and lives to cover the basic needs. And these political values, democratic values, and these are part of the more sophisticated needs in our lives. And so that's why, correctly say, Liliana, that
Anca, can you come closer to the computer? We have a little bit of difficulties in hearing what you are saying.
okay,
It's better.
It's
if you
better
come
now.
closer.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Sorry. I used to have a good network here at home, but yeah. So yeah, I link to this idea that indeed for countries with higher income, paying attention to other needs other than basic needs, it's normal and it's easier. Also, we are talking about countries with long-term tradition of democracy, of applying democratic rules, of understanding what means freedom, what means the freedom of speech. All these values, I mean, think of the fact that people in Western Europe, they were born in societies that all these values existed. But in this part of the world, in Eastern Europe and even beyond, we were not born in such societies. We had to learn from scratch. And it is true that we were not encouraged to learn. We were not, those who took over the power, they were not so happy. Say, hey, now we are free. Let's implement all good practices and democratic rules. No, because these good practices and democratic values would have weakened their power. Yeah. So 2 points here on the comment of what you mentioned about the colleague from Georgia. Yes. The development of a country and income per capita and the richness of the country matters. Also, the long-term democracy and the strength of a democracy also matters in building a strong civil society. And that's another reason for which, for example, we in Romania, we have to fight a lot and to make sure every day that the civil society is growing and is more and more relevant.
Thank you, Anca. In the continuation of this and of the question from Gvanza Davitashvili, I would like to say that I think illiberals are trying to demoralize the democratic forces in your country and in other countries. But what we are all saying here is that in order to build democracy and further democracy and develop it, I think we all need to work on it. We all need to put energy into actions, and there is no other option, I think. And again, I think these people who are saying that Europe and the EU states have major democracy building problems, I think they are just trying to put you off. and demoralize you. But in all honesty, our whole region, and Europe including, and Western Europe including, we all need to defend the democratic values if we believe in them. If we don't believe in them, then just join the illiberal ranks. What can we say? But you just need to be aware that in order to preserve these values, we need to fight. We need to fight back and not let ourselves demoralized. That would be my reaction. I will take, if you would like, the final points and words from the main speakers, because we are coming close to the end of our roundtable discussion, which I think was great, and I thank you all for it. So if you have a final thought, please say it. Thank you, Andrea.
If I can, thank you very much again for organizing it. And I really enjoyed this discussion, because otherwise I would not have the privilege of meeting with you, Anca and Alina. And I think this is great. When smart women are getting together, the change is happening. And the change might not happen, like suddenly there will be NGOs, mushrooming and changing the world, but we started to think about really important and crucial issues. And I think that the changes, as I mentioned, starts from inside, and also that we should stop copying and hoping that we will catch up with this imagined West, because this imagined West was never existing. But and I would not say that, and this imagined democratic tradition is also very problematic, because in every country has got its own dark legacy and dark past, starting from England, from Sweden, the colonial legacy and the Holocaust had been really major forces shaping our history. So I'm extremely excited and happy and looking forward to the years to come, because history is knocking on our door. So the question is, what will we respond? And I think this kind of discussion is a good way to start a meaningful conversation about important issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. So we are making history. The history is in making, and we are part of it. It depends whether we want to be passive or active. Thank you. Anca, would you like to say just a final thought?
I have to confess that I was a little bit terrified at the beginning that we are going to spend a few hours and what are we going to talk about, and but now after really many hours, I feel that we really I learned many things for you, and I'm grateful for this, because I believe that at least for myself, it's good that every day I pick up new ideas and I learn something. So this is how I turn myself into I don't know, wiser person. That's my hope. So we debated on this very important topic of, in general, of illiberalism, but more importantly, we discussed what we can do, each of us, from our we are a tiny part of the entire mechanism. So each of us is a part of this mechanism. How can we contribute to fight illiberalism? And so I learned that we should make sure every day that we support a strong civil society, that we take action, we take position, we speak up, we make sure that we contribute from as we can to have strong institutions, and we contribute to long-term policies that at the end of the day are somehow are conducting our countries, for development, for prosperity, for and for implementing the rules, the democratic rules. So what I take with me is that, there are great women that are thinking about these topics, and we do have solutions. We have ideas and we have solutions, and we should continue these discussions.
Thank you very much, Anca, Senator Anca DRAGU. You took the time today to spend with us. I'm really grateful and humbled by your presence. Let me invite Alina to say final words, comments.
Yeah, very briefly, I think we would not be true to ourselves if we ended this conversation, great, very interesting, very informative conversation, without mentioning woke culture and cancel culture. Because this is the type of extremism that I was referring to in my initial remarks. This is not the answer to illiberalism. This is only polarizing even more, and it's only contributing to increasing illiberalism. So it has a perverse effect, actually, to what it's trying to accomplish. And I think we should try and first understand it, acknowledge it, and then try to moderate the debate to the best that we actually can.
Thank you very much, Alina. Indeed, we should continue our conversation along these lines. Let me end by quoting Guanta Davitashvili, who is saying, is writing here, brilliant and very inspiring discussion. Many thanks to speakers, moderator, and congratulations to organizers. Thank you very much. And let us end this wonderful event with this idea that we need to increase. This is Galina Yakova saying we should increase the space for critical free thinking, and we should not limit free speech if we want to look for solutions. So I think this kind of event is creating the space for both critical thinking and free speech to find solutions. Thank you very much to all of you, and to the wonderful team that we don't see here, but they are behind the scenes, to Ana Maria Angelescu, to Andrea Mitan, to Ioana Blaga, very much thank you, to Rebecca Bishuta, our volunteers. I'm not going to mention all of them, but thank you very much. Alexia as well, thank you.
Thank you, Liliana.
Thank you, all of you.
Bye.